Welcome back to Troubleshooting Agile. Hi there, Jeffrey.
Hi, Squirrel. So large language models, and I'll maybe expose a bit about what I've done or what we've done with them in my organization, which is I have a data science group that reports to me, and we're becoming kind of the internal experts for us on LLMs. And then we were also looking to see how could we democratize knowledge and use of LLMs. And so there was a deliberate initiative within the company to boost people's knowledge and awareness and even use of the technologies. And one of the things that I personally did was I tried to use the LLMs to see how they were as a communication tool. And so I took one of the case studies that you and I have talked about in the past, which is the Ted and Paula case study. This is something that we got from Roger Schwarz in his Ground Rules for Effective Teams.
And it's an example of a difficult conversation. Ted and Paula don't agree about how a presentation went, and Paula isn't saying it.
Yeah, that's right.
The goal of the exercise when you do it yourself, we do this with audiences often, is to get the audience to think of ways that as Paula, you could say more of what you're thinking. So that's just the setup of what Jeffrey's talking about. Keep going.
That's right. Yeah. And it's actually called the Withholding Information Case Study. Roger Schwarz also uses in his book, The Skilled Facilitator.
We'll link to it in our show notes. I think we have it somewhere. It's in lots of his books. Anyway, we'll find it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is the case is everyone, of course, reads the case in our 2-column case study format that we talk about in our book, and that also is in this book. The right-hand column, which has the dialogue, is very placid. There's really not a lot going on. Paul's asking, well, how do you think it went? And asking some questions, but everything doesn't seem like there's a lot of conflict there in a way that's totally normal and natural. When I do the role play and I only speak out the right-hand side, people are like, yeah, that sounds like that's a conversation that happens all the time. But when you
sounds
look
like
at
a good conversation,
column,
like it's effective and everybody's happy. Then you read the left-hand column and you see the seething, boiling lava underneath.
That's right. It's a totally different story. It's very all kind of emotional energy going on, and acting that out. The internal voice. You can tell kind of the upsetness that's going on, all the energy and emotion that's being withheld. And it's just not part of the dialogue. And what we talk about on this podcast and in our book is about how to bring more of that into the conversation so you can have an actually productive conversation with productive conflict. Different views can evolve. So it's a very nice teaching tool. So I tried feeding it into ChatGPT to see how it would work. And I tried to get it to say, I'm Paula and here's what I'm thinking and feeling. What should I say? And what I found was it actually gave really good advice. Like what its version of Paula would have shared all those things. And I actually kind of struggled a bit to try to get it to role play Paula, not wanting to say things.
Yeah, so trying to be the original Paula, who's doing a bad job and isn't sharing information. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid conflict. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and trying to think of all the reason justifications. And while it would modify the wording, it still kept, it just found good ways to bring those elements in. And so one thing that it made me think about is the future of these kind of agents as a potential conversational partner, as a way to help people practice their conversations, also to get advice. I want to send this email to this person. I'm really angry, and here's what happened, to see as ways to help coach people through. Because I can do it, and certainly you've done it with people one-on-one, but they often struggle to do it on their own. This is why we have the exercises we do so they can build those skills. And I just thought it'd be really interesting to see LLMs become a more common part of people's toolkit for productive conversations. And maybe even expanding that, how could they do as a maybe a facilitator in a group conversation?
Well, that's interesting. Now, I also have started to recommend to my coaching clients, rather than finding a local 8-year-old, which is one of my favorite pieces of advice, because 8-year-olds are very good, first of all, at pretending, and second of all, at being annoying. So if you want to have somebody pretend to be your annoying boss, an 8-year-old is a really good candidate. But also people in your life, colleagues who know the person, or maybe who don't know the person but know you. There are lots of good conversation partners that I've been recommending for a long time, for people to practice a difficult conversation, a trust conversation that you want to have with a stakeholder like a customer service or something like that, or the tech team when you're wanting to agree on deadlines or some difficult conversation. Those folks can be very helpful. And I have said, now try out one of the large language models. I tend to send people not to ChatGPT for a reason I'll say in a moment, but I tend to send them to character.ai, which I am told, and I have anecdotal evidence, but certainly nothing concrete, I haven't tried it very much, is better at pretending to be somebody else. So you can have a conversation there with Einstein or Richard Feynman or somebody like that. I think there's kind of these preset characters, but if I understand it right, which I may not, and I would love listeners to tell me what their experience is, and maybe there are better ones out there. These things are cropping up all the time. The experience is that you can tell it a bit about the person you want, the person who might be difficult, the person who's it seems to you to be recalcitrant, unwilling to budge on a deadline or give you more information about a client or something like that. And it'll play that better. It's kind of designed to be a player. This is where one of the several things that large language models are actually good at. They're terrible at writing. Please don't write anything and put it on the internet or write your homework or anything like that with these things. They're boring as heck. Not to mention they make stuff up, but most important, they just write the lowest common denominator of the internet, which is not a very high common denominator. But here's the thing. They're very good at making stuff up, so let's use that. And let's have them be actors. And I really find them effective at that for that purpose. The problem with the ones that are generic, like ChatGPT and Bard, all of these are carefully trained. It's part of the production of these models, is that they are fine-tuned to be extremely helpful, to share information, to give you more. You ask it, is Rio de Janeiro the capital of Brazil? And it says no, and let me tell you why. Here's the actual capital, and here's when it was built. It gives you a lot of extra information. It's supposed to do that. Because it was essentially given electric shocks if it didn't during its training. So I'm not surprised at all that it can be helpful and that it struggles to not be helpful. You have to train it in a different way to get this, to really get this ability to act unhelpfully.
And I think that's what you had told me was your big concern is while we do tell people to be more transparent and more curious, but there's also times where you have to share your own views and advocate that you're going to do something that people don't want to do. And the phrase disappointing people helpfully. And I think that's the thing where you think that the models just aren't tuned in such a way to assert a position that, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get to B because I'm doing A. We agreed that that's a higher priority, or it's a higher priority to me. So therefore, I'm doing A and not B. You think that just doesn't fit in the current robot mindset, that the LLMs will be like, oh, you want me to do B? Okay, fine, sure, I'll go do that instead.
Or they'll say an awful lot of what we would call, and what Chris Argyris, who originated all this stuff, would call easing in. So because they're trained to be so polite and so helpful, you have to think of the tools that you find commercially that are commonly available, like ChatGPT, as kind of subservient, as servants. And they're trained to act that way, and you notice that in their responses. And so I would expect that it might say, I'm terribly sorry. If we could hire some more people, we'd be able to do the thing that you would like. We're going to do this instead, but it really breaks my heart. Whereas that's may not be how you actually feel, and it is not the most effective way to disappoint someone helpfully. It's much more effective to boldly and clearly assert that the priorities have shifted, that their item is less important and something else is more important, and why. And not to give a lot of apologies and easing in and trying to make the other person feel good, because you're not trying. You don't actually want the other person to feel good. That's not sharing what you have in your left-hand column, what you are actually thinking and feeling. Now, if you really do feel that way, that's great, and the tools probably can help you with phrasing if that's something you struggle with. But most of us don't. Most of us struggle with coming in and saying, "Hey, Jeffrey, we're not recording a podcast today. It's more important that I shovel the garden because there's been 10 inches of snow here in Britain." There hasn't, but if there were, that would be the sort of thing that I think Jeffrey would find most helpful, because then he could say, "Great, I'm going to go surfing." He doesn't live in Britain. He lives someplace where he could do that, and that would be more helpful than me spending 5 minutes apologizing to him before I told him that. So if you want to practice having difficult conversations, which if you listen to us at all, you know we really want you to do, use them but with caution. Try to get them to play a difficult role, to be the difficult character if you can. But you're still, I think, going to need some human help at the moment to learn how to disappoint people, hopefully as assertively as you probably need to.
Yeah, I would love to hear people's feedback on that. Also, I'd love to hear people, if you go and help, and try to get it to help you and what you say, put all your context in, put all your left-hand thoughts in, all the things
Very
that you're
important. Yes.
struggling with. Don't try to give ChatGPT your draft, but instead give it all your context and see what it comes up with. And I want to see if you had the experience I did in the role play, which is actually it was better and braver about bringing in some of the elements than you might have been yourself. I think, and I'll be curious, Squirrel, if your point about the lack of confrontation is something that people see. But I do think this is an area that, as I look back on 2023, was one of the most interesting things to happen in terms of communication, and I think could have a big impact going ahead into 2024 and beyond on communication and teamwork. And the kind of things that we talk about. So really, I'm hoping this is something that our listeners go and test and then write in and tell us like, yeah, it was great, or no, it was terrible, and here's why. Because I think there's a lot of potential here.
We would really love to hear from you if you're doing anything with these tools. If you are writing documents that people read, but please don't write to us using ChatGPT. I think that would probably be terribly boring. So please write to us in your own voice. But we would sure love to hear from you if you are using them to practice. And if maybe you've been inspired by us to go and try it. What are your results when you ask it to the tool to be a boss or a difficult employee or somebody that you're having a difficult conversation with? What do you see? What results do you get? Where this is an experimental world. We're no longer writing deterministic programs here, so we're going to have different results. We're going to have different outcomes, and I know Jeffrey and I are going to continue experimenting in this area. We'd sure love to hear what you think. You may also think this is the dumbest idea ever, and you think that humans are never going to be replaced by computers for human conversation. That would also be an interesting point of view. And we'd love to hear all of that from you. The way to get in touch with us, of course, is at agileconversations.com. We post on X. We're trying out other things. Tell us where else we should, so you can find us there. We would love to hear from you. And of course, there you'll also find our book and free videos and material for practicing conversations and a whole bunch of other good stuff. So we'd really like to see you at agileconversations.com. And the other way to keep in touch, of course, is whether you use ChatGPT to summarize us or not, to come back next Wednesday when we'll have another episode of Troubleshooting Agile. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Squirrel.